Hello everyone, welcome to Homeschool. I hope everyone is doing well. So in this video, we'll start with the third unit, that is the cell structure and function. Very important unit because it has got more weightage in your Neet as well as in the board examination. And today we are starting with the 8th chapter of the third unit, that is the cell, the unit of the life. So why do we call cell as the unit of the life, or what exactly is the importance of the cell? So why do we call it as the basic unit? See, whenever we consider any element, okay, whenever we consider anything, any structure, a building, a human, an animal, a plant, anything. So whatever a living or a non-living organism, so always we see what is the most basic structure of that particular element or organism or structure or a building. So if you are in your college, if you are in your school, then your school is built brick by brick, isn't it? So your school or your college is not built directly as a wall. It is being built as small bricks first, and then brick by brick it has been built into a wall, and then it has been built into a huge building, isn't it? So that a small brick is called as the basic unit of that particular building or your school and college. Similarly, so if you observe yourself, we are very huge, isn't it? When you compare to a small organisms, or when you compare to unicellular organisms or microbes, and you're actually a very huge organism. We all are huge organisms, isn't it? So when such a huge organism is there, definitely there is again a small structure, a small basic unit which is building this huge organism. Okay, so that basic unit is the cell. It is the element which is differentiating a living organism with a non-living structure or a molecule. Okay, so if there is one living organism or a living element and a non-living element, so how do you differentiate, on what basis? Which is a very basic criteria to differentiate. It is the presence of the cell. If a cell, again I repeat, or I just tick mark the point, a complete cell. About a complete cell we will speak a bit later. So as it now, the cell, if a cell is present, it is being considered as a living element, and if a cell is not present, then it is being considered as a non-living element. Okay, then what is a complete cell? So a cell is actually an independent element. Fine, cell is always an independent element. A single cell, though the humans, let's take an example of humans only, it's very easy and understanding. If like humans are made up of millions of cells, then each cell is able to live independently. Or we'll take the minute organisms, it is a microorganism. They are usually unicellular in nature, isn't it? So in spite of being unicellular, they are able to survive. It means that one single cell, okay, when you compare a huge organism like human, and when you compare a small organism or a minute organism like bacteria, then this is a single cell, it is a unicellular, and this is a multicellular. This is multicellular, this is unicellular. So cell is able to survive in this case also, cell is able to survive in this case also. So if it is able to survive in this case, then the cell as a single unit, okay, a cell as a single unit can also survive. Hence we call this as the basic unit of the life. Okay, it is being called as basic unit of life. And what exactly is composed of one single cell, those details we will study a bit later. But a complete cell is required for an organism to be called as a living organism. If if the cell is not complete. Okay, if a cell is not complete, in that case we cannot call that particular organism as a living organism, just as in case of the viruses when they are outside the host. Okay, when they are outside the host, we don't call viruses as the living organism. Only when it is inside the host, we call viruses as the living entities. So the reason behind that is, when the virus is outside the host, it is not a complete cell. Alright, hence we call it as the non-living entity when it is outside the cell, and we call it as a living entity when it is within the host, where its DNA will be incorporated into the host cell, which is a complete cell. Okay, hence a complete cell is required to be called as a basic unit of life. Clear? Okay. All the details of the cell, what is cell made up of, what all is present in the cell. So those details we will see a bit later. First we will see a small part of a history of the cell. So who discovered the cell and how exactly the cell came up. Fine. Everyone knows who is the person who discovered the cell. It was Robert Hooke who discovered the cell. Robert Hooke in the year 1665. So very important person. Robert Hooke in the year 1665. So he was studying a plant called as Quercus. Quercus is a plant. So it is been asked in the examination many a time. So remember, Quercus plant, and in which part of the Quercus? It was cork. Alright. So Robert Hooke, when he was studying the cork of the Quercus plant, we have already seen the morphology and anatomy of the plant, and from those chapters we have already known what is a cork. Cork is a dead part of the plant. Why it has been called as a dead part of the plant? Because it has the depositions of the suberin, isn't it? Cork has the depositions of the suberin, and hence always cork is a dead part of the plant. And Robert Hooke, when he was studying the quark of the Quercus plant, he could actually observe some tightly packed geometrically or geometric shaped cells, actually something like this. So this was the first diagram which Robert Hooke could see. Right? So if they ask in the examination who discovered cells, then it is directly Robert Hooke. But if they ask you who discovered the dead cells or who discovered the living cells, then if there is dead cell, then definitely it is the Robert Hooke, because the cork of the Quercus was studied by Robert Hooke, and cork is a dead part of the plant. So these cells which were studied by Robert Hooke were actually the dead cells. Whereas coming to the living cells, so I'll write it. These are all the dead cells. Fine. Then next, another person, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who is also called as father of microbiology. So as well as who has been credited with the invention of the microscope. So he is the person who actually studied the living cells of the plant. So he studied living cells. So if in the examination, if it is being asked who studied the dead cells for the first time, then it is Robert Hooke. If they ask who discovered this cell, then also it is Robert Hooke. But if they ask who discovered the living cell, then it should be Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Okay, as well as he is being credited with he has the credit of discovery of the microscope, which later on led to the revealing of each and every detail of the cell. Okay, so Once Robert Hooke discovered the living cells and microscope, all the other details or all the inner parts of the cells were also studied using the microscope. Among them, the most important one is the Robert Brown. Robert Brown, who discovered nucleus. Okay, Robert Brown is the person who discovered nucleus. See, these are very important names in this chapter. Robert Hooke, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, fine, and then Robert Brown, who discovered the nucleus. So, after the discovery of the details of the cell or the parts of the cell, then came up the cell theory. So, what exactly is the cell theory? So, it is a statement or it is a research or it is the findings of few scientists, most importantly two scientists, that is the Slidden and Schwann theory. Okay, it is very famously called as, rather than calling it as cell theory, people call it as Slidden and Schwann theory. Okay, so many scientists, more importantly these two persons, so they had a detailed study of the cell and they came up with their findings as the cell theory. So now we'll study what exactly is the cell theory. In the year 1838, okay, so first scientist, that is Matthias Schlitten. Okay, Matthias Schlitten. Matthias Schlitten. This person is a German botanist and he is the one who actually gave a statement that the plants or all the plants are made up of different types of cells which are being called or which together will constitute a tissue. It means that all the plants are made up of different tissues and tissue is a group of a cell. So this statement was put forth by Matthias Schlitten, who is a German botanist. So remember one thing, I mentioned two names, isn't it? One is Schlitten, another one is Schwann. Next we are going to write that also. So Schlitten actually studied the plants. Schlitten studied the plants, and exactly after 1 year of Schlitten, that is in the year 1839, okay, one more person, Theodor Schwann. Theodor Schwann, he studied animals. He studied animals, but somehow Schwann actually studied both plants as well as animals, but his findings or his contribution to the cell theory was animals, hence we take it as animals only. So if in case when they ask a question about cell theory, then if they ask among Schlitten and Schwann who actually studied the plants, then plants should be taken as Schlitten. If they ask only animals, then it is Schwann. If they ask both plants and animals, or like name the person who studied both plants and animals, then again it is Schwann only. Fine. And Schwann is an British zoologist. This guy, he is a German botanist and he is a British zoologist. So, what were the findings of the Schwann? Matthias Schlitten, what were the findings of Schlitten? It was plants are made up of different types of cells and they constitute, those cells will constitute a tissue. So, it like indirectly what exactly is Schlittens telling? He is telling that the plants are made up of different types of cells which make up different tissues in the plant. And what are the findings of Schwann now? So here Schwann is telling that all the cells of the animals or in general, okay, all the cells have got one thin outer layer. Okay, so this Schwann is telling that all the cells have a thin outer layer, a thin outer layer, which is today called as the plasma membrane, which is today called as plasma membrane. So this is the first finding of the Schwann. And then second one, as I said, Schwann studied both plants as well as animals. So he was able to differentiate the parts between the plants and the animals. Hence, he also concluded one more point. So if you remember the morphology and anatomy parts, there we know that plant cell actually have a cell wall around it, isn't it? Plant cell have cell wall, whereas animal cell doesn't have cell wall. So that difference was actually studied by Schwann, and he concluded that cell wall is present only in plants. Only in plants. Okay. So whereas Schleiden, what did he study or what did he state actually? He stated plants are made up of different types of cells. Different types of cells which will make up tissues. This was given by Schleiden, and these two findings were actually given by Schwann. But somehow, though they studied all these things, somehow one particular concept or one particular answer for a question was missing here in the findings of these two. The question was, how did a cell arise from or how did a new cell actually originate? From where did the cell originate? So what was the reason behind the origin of the cell? So this was not answered by Schleiden and Schwann. So one more person came into picture here. So try to understand, these findings were put forth by Schleiden and Schwann, but one question, very important question, that is, from where did the cell originate? So that was not answered by Schleiden and Schwann, and hence one more person called as Rudolf Virchow. So Rudolf Virchow in the year 1855. In the year 1855, Rudolf Virchow. So he answered the question, and he answered that the cell exists from a pre-existing cell. Cell exists from pre-existing cell. So this was the finding of the Rudolf Virchow. So based on these three guys, or based on these three scientists, and more importantly Schleiden and Schwann, so based on their findings, the final cell theory was put forth. So they may ask you a question, okay, which among the statements are a part of a cell theory? So we will write the statements of the cell theory now. The first statement is, all the cells are composed of, the cells and products of the cells, or all the organisms. All the organisms are composed of cells and products of cells. So this is the first statement. So what does this mean? Any organism irrespective of a unicellular organism or multicellular organism. So if it is a unicellular organism or if it is a multicellular organism, okay, in this case it is made up of a single cell. So here we can say that it is made up of products of cells, and here it is made up of many cells. So they are composed of cells here. Again, inside the human, if you take only one single cell, again it is made up of the product of the cell. Okay, so this is the first statement in the cell theory. Second statement, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Pre-existing cells. So this actually is the finding of the scientist Rudolf Virchow. Fine. So these two statements will make up the cell theory. So if they ask you the cell theory, then you are supposed to write this. And who are the scientists who have given the cell theory? It is the Schleiden and Schwann, or Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann are the scientists who gave the cell theory. This is all about the history of the cell. Of course, there are many things to be known, but somehow for your syllabus, so this is enough to be known in the history part. So now moving on to the other details of the cell. So we'll firstly study about the shapes and sizes of the cell. To speak about the sizes of the cell, that is the smallest cell as well as the biggest cell and longest cell. So first we will write it first, shape and size. Shape and size of cell. Among them, first we are taking the size. So among the size, which is the smallest one? Smallest. The smallest organism is the mycoplasma or PPLO. What is PPLO? PPLO is pleuropneumonia-like organism. Pleuropneumonia-like organism. Okay, so PPLO is the smallest organism, but again remember, while asking the question, they may trick you in this way also. Which is the smallest organism with cell wall, or which is the smallest organism without the cell wall? If it is without the cell wall, okay, that is without cell wall, it is the PPLO, or they can also give it as mycoplasma. Okay, mycoplasma or the PPLO, which is almost around 0.3 micrometers or 0.3 microns in size. Then with the cell wall, if they ask which is the smallest organism with cell wall, then it is the bacteria. It is the bacteria, which is 3 to 5 microns. Okay, the size of the bacteria will be from 3 to 5 microns. So this is the smallest organism with cell wall, and if they ask the smallest organism without cell wall, then it is PPLO, that is pleuropneumonia-like organism, or in other term, or otherwise it is also called as mycoplasma. Fine. Then which is the biggest one? The biggest cell. Biggest cell is egg cell. Egg cell of ostrich. The size of the cell is 7 here. Okay, the biggest cell is the egg cell of the ostrich, which is 7 microns in size. Then, which is the longest one? Longest cell is the nerve cell. Longest cell is the nerve cell. So, the smallest is, if it is without cell wall, it is mycoplasma or PPLO. If it is with cell wall, it is bacteria. And if they ask you the longest, it is the nerve cell. If it is biggest, it is the egg cell of the ostrich. So these are the sizes of the cell. Somehow, when you take up the shapes of the cell, there is a very great diversity, or there is a very many different shapes of cells actually. Like it may be round, it may be oval, it may be elongated, or it may be rectangular, it may be narrow cells, branched cells, unbranched cells, so many irregular shapes, many different shapes of the cells. So we will note some important shapes of the cells now. The first shape is the irregular shape, irregular or amoeboid. Irregular or amoeboid shape. So what is the shape of the amoeba? It is totally irregular. You cannot predict what is the shape of the amoeba, isn't it? So the example for this is WBC, white blood cells. Okay, white blood cells or white blood corpuscles. So these are the example of the irregular or amoeboid shaped cells. Fine. The next shape is the spindle shape or elongated. Second one, spindle shape or elongated. So if you write it this way, it becomes spindle. If you write it this way, it becomes elongated. So an example for the horizontal or like spindle shape, so that is the smooth muscle. So if it is written this way, we call it as spindle. Okay, it is called as spindle, and example for this is the smooth muscle. Smooth muscles. And if it has been written in the in the vertical way, then we call it as an elongated one. An example for that is the trachea. So we'll draw the trachea also. I'll draw a small one. So there is one more outer layer here. Okay. So this is a trachea. So it is an elongated shape. It is a elongated shape. Then the branched shape, third one, it is branched. So where do you find the branched shape cells? So they are being found in the brain, that is the nerve cells. Okay, or neurons usually are branched structures. So how does a structure of neuron looks like? This is something like, okay. Okay, this is a structure of a neuron or a star-shaped cell. So it is a nerve cell. It's a nerve cell. And what is the shape? The shape is a branched shape. And if you see a very simple ones like round or oval shaped cells, round or oval shaped. An example for this is mesophyll cells. So if you have observed, we have studied it in the previous chapter, isn't it? The cells are round or oval. They are being very nicely arranged cells. Here we have all the chloroplast present inside, isn't it? So these are mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells. And what is the shape? Shape is the round or oval shape. Then another shape is the rectangular shaped cells. So 4 are completed. Fifth one, rectangular shaped, and an example for the rectangular shaped cell is a muscle fiber. Okay, example is muscle fiber. And what is a rectangle? This is a rectangle. Okay, then one more important shape of the cell is the long cells or narrow cells. Long and narrow. Fine. An example for this is the columnar epithelial cells. So how are they arranged? They are arranged this way. Columnar epithelial. Columnar epithelial cells. Next one more cell which is like you exactly cannot take it as a shape, but the shape itself is being called as the name of the particular organism. That is, if you have seen the sponges, they are in a particular shape like this. Okay, so this is a shape, this is a typical shape of a sponge, and this shape is called as a choanocyte. I mean, anything which is being seen in this particular shape, usually it is being called as a choanocyte shape, okay, and that is seen in case of sponges. Okay, so these are few important shapes of the or important types or actually shapes or forms of the cell here. Fine. One more also you can take actually round or biconcave shape. That is a very general shape. Everyone will be knowing. RBC is the answer for that. Okay. So round and biconcave. Anyways, I'll write it here somewhere. Round and biconcave. Round and biconcave. Example is RBC. It is the, or they may ask in this way also, what is the shape of the RBC? It is round and biconcave. Or they may ask which among the following are in the shape of round and biconcave or disc shaped also. Okay, round and biconcave disc shaped, it is the RBC. This is all about the shape and size of the cell. So in the next video, we will study the overview of the cell and types of the cell, that is prokaryote and eukaryote, as well as the difference between the prokaryote and eukaryote. An overview of a cell as well as difference between prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. Guys, this is a very important chapter. Please listen to the classes very carefully, as well as have a habit of making the notes, especially for this chapter, because you can expect many questions from this particular chapter, and every small word of this chapter can be turned into a question. Okay, so there is no doubt if they ask the question from any corner of this chapter, because every small word of this chapter can be converted into a question. So be careful with this particular chapter. Very important and very important chapter, guys. Okay, so I'll meet you guys in the next class with the other remaining part of the chapter. Thank you guys. Please subscribe and share the videos with your other friends also. Especially this chapter is very important. So please let them also have the benefit of the content provided in this channel. Okay, thank you guys.